Welcome to chapter 6 of the book of Ezekiel. The last chapter, Ezekiel was told to tell the people what was going to happen to Jerusalem by the man that he saw above the firmament, above the throne that was above the firmament, who came down and told him, gave him a scroll, fed it to him, and so forth. And now it expands. It says, and the word logos of the Lord came to me, just as Jeremiah, the logos of the Lord came to him, Jeremiah, and here it's Ezekiel saying, O son of Anthropu, man, fix your face upon the mountains of Israel. Ori, we have Or, the mountains of Israel. So that's all of the area, not just Jerusalem. And prophet have sown against them. That's the verb for to prophesy. A prophetev, prophetis is a prophet. And you shall say, so to the people in Israel, here he says, O mountains of Israel, hear the word of Adonai Kyriou. Well, the mountains don't hear anything. So this is another figure of speech. There are books on the figures of speech. Bullinger, E.W. Bullinger, wrote a great book. I should get these and see if I can find them and have them for sale in the bookstore, but you might be able to find it online. Figures of Speech of the Bible, I believe it's called, by E.W. Bullinger, who lived back in the 1800s, and he goes into all the different types of figures of speech. So here, mountains of Israel, here, the logon of Adonai Kyriou, that's Kyrios, the Lord. Thus, because we mentioned that in the last chapter, how Adonai means Lord or Master. So this would be, in other places we have Kyrios. Thus, Legi says Adonai Kyrios to the mountains, and to the hills, and to the ravines, and to the groves. Behold, now, this is probably general area. The whole area is covering them all, the mountains, hills, ravines, groves. But it could be talking or referring more to the places where they set up these idolatrous idols and did these idolatrous rites to these idols, but I'm not sure here if that would be what it was. Could be. Behold, ego, I, the ego in the id, the ego, the I bring upon you a Romphaeon, a broad sword, and your high places will be utterly destroyed. So here I see it refers to the high places, so I'm kind of thinking this is what it's talking about up there. And your altars and your sacred precincts will be broken down. And we know from Jeremiah that they were serving Ashtart and the wives, and they went to Israel and they refused to bow down to Jehovah. And they were doing these, they had these altars and so forth, and even sacred precincts, areas that were in Israel. And I will throw down your slain. You can add that to English derivatives, books 51:34:1. Traumatias, we have a trauma. Before your eidolon, idol. Eidolon, idol, almost a transliteration there. I will throw down your slain before your idols. So people that were being idolatrous are going to be killed in front of their false gods. And I shall offer the corpses of the sons of Israel in front of their eidolon, so their dead bodies. And I shall scatter your osta, bone, osteoporosis, which I have, is a infirmament of the bones and the cartilage. I will scatter your bones, kiklo, a cycle, comes from that, something round about your altars. In all your house, the cities shall be made quite desolate. All the areas in all your house, the cities, the house being the whole, I would think he's talking about like Israel. This is the house of Israel. And the high places shall be obliterated, which they were, and so that your altars shall be utterly destroyed. And apparently they set up these altars in like these ravines and high places and so forth, and even into the city of Jerusalem in the temple. And your idols shall be broken and caused to cease. And your sacred precincts shall be lifted away, and your works shall be wiped away, all taken away. And travmate, again, the same word as before, shall fall the slain ones in your meso midst. And you shall realize that I am Kyrios, that I am Jehovah the Lord. Then you'll know. And I shall leave behind some in the taking place from out of your ones escaping from the broadsword among the nations. And in let's see, why isn't it jumping up there? Let's try this. No tools. There it is. You're being dispersed in the places. And the ones escaping from yours shall remember me among the nations of which they were taken captive there. I have sworn against their heart, against the one fornicating from me, and with their eyes fornicating after their practices. Oh, how many times we see this happening with Israel. This period of time he's talking about in the time of Jesus, the rejection of Christ, and then 1948 and their fornicating and homosexual rights and for a whole week in a festival in Tel Aviv, and I don't know what else they could be doing. And they shall smite against their faces for the evils which they did in all their abominations. So this is, I can't imagine the people that are doing this today, and they don't even have a temple, they don't have a priesthood, they have nothing less than they had ever before, and they're doing these evils of what's going to happen. And the book of Revelation tells us it's going to be a terrible situation, I believe, in the future, harlot city, Jerusalem. And they shall realize that I, the Lord, have, now we jump around these numbers, not to, spoken, 3, 4, to do, all, 5, 6, these things against them, 7, 4, 8, nothing, 9. So we have this jumping around. It's probably one of the most convoluted ones that I've seen. So I, the Lord, have not spoken to do all these evils against them for nothing. In a purpose. For thus says the Lord, clap with the hand and stamp with the feet and say, well done over the abominations of the house of Israel. By the broadsword and by plague and by famine they shall fall. And if they're doing worse today, why would it not fall again? The one far away, makran, is, we have the word macro, comes from that. The one far away shall come to an end by thanato, and I mentioned in the last chapter that many times means plague. And the one near shall fall by the broadsword, and the one near in Jerusalem, and the one being left behind, and the one being compassed by a siege will be finished off by famine. All these things are coming against Jerusalem and Israel. And I shall exhaust my anger against them. Well, it wasn't exhausted, apparently, because his anger was against them at the time of the Romans. So when is this exhaustion taking place? I don't believe it has yet to have taken place. And you shall know that I, Kyrios, in your slain being in the midst of your idols, round about your altars, and upon every high hill, and on all the tops of the mountains, and underneath every shady tree, underneath every bushy oak, of which they offered there a scent of pleasant aroma to all their idols. So this destruction and the idols, the idolatry, they didn't have idolatry once they came back, Ezra and Nehemiah. They basically rebuilt Jerusalem, rebuilt the temple, instituted the sacrifices until the time of Jesus in 70 A.D. They no longer had the idolatry, but they didn't have the belief. They changed from idolatry into changing the laws of God and making what's called the oral law that they developed in those time between Nebuchadnezzar's destruction and the time of Herod. They came up with an oral tradition, and it was not written down from God. And this was the problem that they had when Jesus came. It wasn't that they had idols as such, but they had this oral tradition. And I shall stretch out my hirah. Here, a chiro comes from that, chiropractor, hand manipulator, and that shall make the land for extinction. So God is doing it, stretching out his hand against the people of all of Israel and going to make that land for extinction. Now here's an interesting part of this verse here. It says, even from the wilderness of Diblath for ruin, from out of all their habitation, and you shall realize that I am the Lord. Now, what is this Diblath? It was very interesting. I was like, I did a little study on it. I came up with an interesting thing. In the King James Version, it's called Riblah. And Riblah, as you know, is the only, Riblah, you may or may not know, is mentioned here in 6:14. Riblah, the King James. But that's the only place that the word Riblah appears in the King James, and nobody knew where Riblah was. Everybody tried to find Riblah from the King James. They didn't look at the Septuagint. They didn't have an Apostolic Bible to help them, but now you do. So this word Diblathah, and I missed it when I went through Jeremiah, appears in other places in the Greek. It appears in Jeremiah 52:9 and 10, and then later in 26 and 27, all in the 52nd chapter of Jeremiah, and it's all Diblathah. And then in 2 Kings 25:6 in the Apostolic Bible, it has a Reblathah in the Greek. I have to check it because maybe the one manuscript had it Reblathah, maybe other ones had a Deblathah. I'm not really sure, but it is a Deblathah and Riblathah in 2 Kings 25:6. Now, so what? You'll say, what's the difference? So there's different names. Well, this is the place that Deblathah is where Zedekiah was taken after he was captured trying to escape from Jerusalem when it was taken over by the troops of the Chaldeans. And he was taken captive by Jericho, and he was led up to Deblathah, where Nebuchadnezzar was staying. And it was way up almost by Carchemish, towards which today up in the upper part of Syria. And there, Zedekiah was blinded. His children were killed in front of him first. He was blinded. And then from Deblathah, he was taken to Babylon. So this interesting because this was written here at Jeremiah before, apparently from what we see, before the end of Zedekiah. It was written during the time of Jehoiakim, I believe. Or no, let me see. It was no, it was Jehoiachin. So it would have been written during Zedekiah. But yet, this is a portent of the future, that even from the wilderness of where Zedekiah, the last king, was slain by Nebuchadnezzar, from out of all their habitation, even the royalty. And you shall realize that I am the Lord. So when this happens, then they will know he is the Lord. They did know, and they found out when they were in Babylon, and they did come back with Ezra and Nehemiah, reinstituted the temple. Chapter 7, the end has come. Now, what end is he talking about? We'll find out. You join us in chapter 7, our next video seminar, and hope you do. God bless.